For 2 whole years, I'd saved every penny, dedicated every overtime hour to this moment, to the dream Paris vacation I'd planned for my family. Then, that morning, in the suffocating silence of the car on the way to the airport, my mother dropped the bomb. "Sweetheart, you know your sister Sydney has been very stressed lately. She needs this trip more, so she's going instead of you." In that instant, in that car, in those few seconds, I experienced the bitterest, deepest pain of betrayal and disappointment. My heart turned to ice, but not a single muscle twitched on my face. But they didn't know that with a single phone call, I would cancel those luxury hotel reservations, those carefully selected private tours, those first-class plane ticket upgrades, and that the magnificent vacation they needed would turn into the biggest nightmare of their lives. My name is Willow, and this was the story of how I would make them pay back with interest for everything they put me through, for every single disappointment. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was 6:02 a.m. I was exactly 2 minutes late. "Mom, just 2 minutes," I said, trying to force a smile onto my face. I moved to get out of the car and help with the luggage, but then I saw her, my sister Sydney, walking out of the house with her own suitcase. My smile froze on my face. In that moment, I felt that cold, unsettling something stir in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked. Trying to keep my voice as steady as possible, my mother turned to me, her expression far too cheerful, too carefree for the situation. "Oh, Willow, darling, we decided Sydney should go instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, she really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me?" "Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything," I said, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. She waved her hand dismissively, as if I'd pointed out some trivial detail. "We're grateful, sweetie, really, but you're always working so hard, you can arrange another trip for yourself later. Sydney needs this now." Sydney, far from feeling any guilt, was watching me with that familiar arrogant smirk, her weight shifted to one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with false gratitude. In that moment, behind that smirk, behind that fake gratitude, I once again saw that deep jealousy, that rivalry that had been going on for years. I had always been the one striving, struggling, succeeding. She had always been the center of attention, always coddled. I looked at them both, my heart pounding in my chest. My father came out a minute later, handing me a suitcase, avoiding eye contact. This is unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling. "This was supposed to be our trip, something I would share with you." "Well, it still is," my mother said with a smile. "Just with Sydney. Don't make a big deal out of this, Willow. Your sister really needs a break." My name was Willow, and for the past 2 years, I'd saved every spare cent, worked overtime to gift my family a trip they would never forget. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours. I had planned every detail, down to the last dinner reservation, but now, standing on my family's driveway, watching my sister settle into the back seat of my car, I realized something I'd avoided for years. No matter how hard I tried, Sydney would always come first in their eyes. This bitter truth hit me like a slap in the face. I clenched my jaw, biting back the sharp retort on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I put on a forced, strained smile and opened the trunk. "Let's go then," I said, my voice flat. If they were going to dismiss me and prioritize her, fine. They could go with her. But I wasn't going to let them enjoy it. No, I definitely wasn't going to let them enjoy it. In that moment, a plan began to form in my mind, a silent, cold, and equally destructive plan. The journey to the airport passed in a suffocating silence, apart from Sydney's endless chatter. "Oh my God, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that, or will the tours take up the whole day?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my eyes fixed on the road, forcing myself not to say anything. Every word she uttered fueled the fire of anger inside me. My mother giggled softly. "Of course. We'll have time, sweetie. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit the inside of my cheek. When we get there. They spoke as if I were no longer part of that we. At one point, my father cleared his throat. "Thanks for driving us, Willow. I know this probably feels unconventional." I looked at him in the rearview mirror. Unconventional? That was the mildest term I'd ever heard. "Unconventional, that's an interesting way to put it, Dad," I said. He couldn't have missed the subtle sarcasm in my voice. He didn't answer, just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Sydney leaned forward from the back seat, her voice as irritating as ever. "You're not mad, are you? I mean, this is a really big gesture on your part, letting me go. I could never afford this on my own." I clenched my jaw and forced a strained smile. "Of course, Sydney. Enjoy the trip." In that moment, I once again saw her true face behind that feigned innocence, that shameless selfishness. She had always been someone who got what she wanted, disregarding others' feelings, and my family had always approved, even encouraged, these behaviors. By the time we reached the airport drop-off point, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I helped them unload their luggage, my mother hugged me. "Thanks for understanding, sweetie. This means a lot to us and to Sydney." I nodded stiffly. "Of course, Mom." Sydney was beaming as she dragged her suitcase towards the entrance. "Thanks, Willow. You're the best." I just stood there, watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. What kind of injustice was this? What kind of family was this? The drive home was a blur. I replayed that conversation in my head over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. This means a lot to Sydney. "You're not mad, are you? You're always working so hard anyway." I parked the car in the driveway and sat there for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I went inside, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I had used to book the trip. Hotel reservations, canceled, tours, refunded, airline upgrades, nope. As I looked at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, I felt the tightness in my chest begin to ease. They wanted to take Sydney instead of me. Fine. But they wouldn't be staying in 5-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. They could explain themselves to the receptionist in Paris. I was tired of being their doormat. The satisfaction I felt in that moment, pressing those cancel buttons, was priceless. This was my silent scream, my first rebellion, and this was just the beginning. They would soon understand just how much they had underestimated my kindness and sacrifice. The calls started, just as I predicted, the moment they landed in Paris. The first tremor from across the ocean came as I was unpacking my suitcase, taking out the clothes I'd carefully chosen for a trip that was no longer mine, and putting them back into my closet. My mother's name flashed on my phone screen, missed calls, followed by panicked texts. They were piling up in my inbox one after another. The irony was bitter. Here I was in my quiet Oregon home, packing away the remnants of the vacation they had disappointed me on, while they were in Paris, flailing helplessly in the wreckage of my dreams. The incessant vibration of the phone filled the room. I sighed for a moment, picked up the phone, and looked at the screen. Several missed calls and unread messages next to my mother's name. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the messages. "Willow, what's going on? The hotel won't let us in. They say there's no reservation. Call me immediately." "Willow, this isn't funny. Fix this right now." A laugh escaped me. I couldn't help it. Fix it? Did they really think that after everything they'd done, I'd just magically appear and make everything right? The phone buzzed again. This time it was Sydney. I let her call go to voicemail too. She left a message. "Willow, this is so childish. We're stranded here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix this immediately." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I had been the one to solve all their problems, cover every mistake, fill every gap. Not anymore. Finally, just to stop the relentless barrage of calls and texts, I decided to answer. My mother's voice assaulted me like a torrent of rage the moment I picked up. "Willow, what have you done? The hotel says the reservation is canceled and none of the tours are booked." I let her yell for a moment, then calmly replied, "I canceled them." There was a long, stunned silence on the phone, then she hissed, "Why would you do that?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Maybe because I wasn't invited on a trip I planned and paid every cent for? I guess you thought chauffeuring you to the airport was participation enough." "We thought you'd understand," she blazed. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice rising. That years of saving and planning every detail meant nothing because Sydney needed a break. That my hard work is worthless in your eyes? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't care. I hung up without waiting for her response and switched off my phone, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful. I felt like I could breathe. If they wanted to prioritize Sydney, fine, but they could handle the rest of the trip without me. The silence lasted only a day. The next morning, my phone started buzzing again with calls and messages. I ignored them at first. I spent the day cleaning the house, catching up on chores. But by evening, my curiosity got the better of me. I turned on my phone and braced myself for a storm of messages. From my mother, "Willow, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. Just fix it." And finally, from my father, "We need to talk. This isn't right." I put the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I had been the one to fix everything, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy. Now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer inside me. How could they expect me to clean up their mess? How could they think I was the one in the wrong? I answered the next call that came minutes later. "Willow," my mother shouted before I could even say a word, "this isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I took a slow sip of my tea. "Embarrassing? You think that's embarrassing? Try being told you're not even included on a trip you spent years saving for and planning every detail of, a trip you paid for." "Stop being dramatic," she flared. "Sydney needed this more than you. And now you can deal with it yourselves," I said firmly. "You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Sydney instead of me. Fine. But don't expect me to finance her vacation." "We're family," she hissed. "We don't do this to each other." I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, I was thinking the exact same thing. From the background, I heard Sydney's voice, whining, "Mom, just hang up. She's impossible." Wow, that was the last straw. "Enjoy your trip," I said, my tone icy. "Oh wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine. And now it's no one's. Goodbye." I hung up again without waiting for a response. For the rest of that evening, I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief, angry that they had put me in this position, but relieved that I had finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them walk all over me. The next few days passed in a blissful silence with my phone turned off. I finally had space to think clearly, away from the barrage of guilt and accusations. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my back porch, enjoying a tranquility I'd craved for a long time. My afternoons were filled with work and small projects I'd put off, things that reminded me how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands. But by the end of the third day, curiosity got the better of me again. I found over a dozen voicemails waiting for me when I switched my phone back on. The first few were from my mother, each more hysterical than the last. "Willow, you need to call me back immediately. This has gone too far. I can't believe you did this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us like this?" Then came Sydney's messages, filled with her usual self-righteous tone. "This is so childish, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Willow." And finally, my father's voice, quieter but no less pointed. "Willow, I don't understand what's gotten into you. Call us back so we can sort this out now." I hesitated before listening to the last voicemail. It was a long one from my mother. Her voice was quieter this time, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. Willow, she began. We're back at the airport now. The trip was ruined. I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister's a wreck, and your father and I, well, to say we're disappointed is an understatement. Call us when you're ready to talk. I deleted the voicemails without responding. I wasn't ready to talk, and frankly, I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was the culmination of years of them putting Sydney first and expecting me to take it with a smile. As the hours passed, I thought about all the times I'd been overlooked or pushed aside. Every vacation where Sydney's whims dictated the plans, every family gathering where my accomplishments were treated as an afterthought. This trip had been the final straw, but the cracks had been forming for years. That evening, my friend Quinn dropped by unannounced, 2 cups of coffee in hand and that unmistakable look of curiosity on her face. I heard what happened, she said, setting the coffee on the table. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she had. My mother was always good at rallying allies when she wanted to guilt me into submission. And, I asked, taking a sip. Quinn shrugged, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the best. No, you are, she said, her voice suddenly serious, because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that was, Willow. Don't let them drag you back down. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Quinn was right. I'd spent too long tearing myself apart to please people who clearly didn't care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle for good. By the time the weekend arrived, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was accompanied by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations, freedom from being the family problem solver, freedom to finally live life on my own terms. But as I expected, the silence didn't last long. It was Sunday afternoon when a call came through that I finally decided to answer. It was my father this time. Willow, he began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Your mother wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me. Go on, I said, leaning back in my armchair. He sighed. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mother's upset, Sydney's furious, and, well, it's a mess, but you're better than this. I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. Better than what, Dad? Better than standing up for myself? Better than refusing to let you walk all over me again? I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who holds things together. This isn't like you. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You're right. It isn't like me. Because I'm not tearing myself apart to clean up your messes anymore. He paused, and for a moment I thought he might finally see my side, but then he said, You're punishing the whole family for one decision. Is that really fair? Fair? I repeated, my voice rising. You want to talk about what's fair? Was it fair when you told me I wasn't important enough to be included on the trip I planned? That you were replacing me with Sydney like I was nothing? That's not what we were trying to do, he said, his voice defensive now. We just thought Sydney needed it more. Of course you did, I blazed. You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything, and I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her, not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice steady. I just need you to understand that I'm tired of being an afterthought. From now on, I come first. Goodbye, Dada. I ended the call and put down the phone, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything, the anger, the sadness, the relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the beginning of something new. I was no longer the family fixer, and I wasn't going to be. They could clean up their own messes. When my family and Sydney finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I was surprisingly calm, parked in their driveway, sipping my coffee and watching their taxi pull up. As they emerged, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mixture of exhaustion and anger. Sydney was the first to speak. "Well, I hope you're happy, Willow." I raised an eyebrow, remaining seated on their porch swing. Happy about what? "Our trip was a disaster," my mother snapped, waving her hand as if to dismiss everything. "We spent the whole week staying in dingy hotels and eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't even get me started on the tours." Sydney chimed in, her arms crossed. "Oh wait, there were no tours. Do you know how humiliating it is to show up and be told there's no reservation?" I took another sip of my coffee, letting their complaints wash over me. "Sounds rough," I said finally, my voice even. "But you wanted to take Sydney, remember? I'm sure you all had a wonderful bonding experience." "That's not the point," my mother retorted, her voice rising. "You knew we couldn't afford everything you planned. You set us up to fail." I stood up, placing my mug on the small table beside me. "No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a special trip for the three of us, something I'd been saving for years. You were the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second." My father finally spoke, his voice quieter but no less accusatory. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Willow. That was extreme." "Was it?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Why should I pay for a trip I wasn't even invited on? If Sydney needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. Be grateful I didn't cancel your return ticket." Sydney rolled her eyes. "You're being so dramatic. It's just money, Willow." "And you're so spoiled," I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume everything magically appears because someone else takes care of it?" They stood there in stunned silence for a moment. "I've been the responsible one for years," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "Fixing everything, planning everything, making sure everything ran smoothly, and for just as long you've all taken it for granted." "That's not fair," my mother began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No, Mom, what's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Sydney over me, like you always do. So I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip, fine. But you don't get to reap the benefits of my hard work without me." I picked up my purse from the porch swing and turned to leave. "I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done." As I walked to my car, I could hear them calling after me, their voices a mixture of anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. The drive home from my parents' house felt strangely peaceful. For years, every visit had left me feeling emotionally drained, but this time I felt lighter. I had finally said what I needed to say, and for the first time, I didn't care about their reaction. When I got back to my own house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They had been so sure I would eventually give in that I would cave. But watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how much I had changed. They could be angry, hurt, or ashamed. It didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life to meet their expectations. The next day, I got a call from Quinn. "So how did it go?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. I chuckled, leaning against my kitchen counter. "Pretty much how you'd imagine. They're furious, Sydney's sulking, and my mom is probably trying to figure out what kind of guilt trip to lay on me to get me back in line." Quinn giggled. "Let her try. You've got a spine now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place." I grinned, grateful. "Thanks, Quinn. Seriously, you've been my rock through all of this." "Always," she said, her voice softening. "So now that you're not playing family problem solver anymore, what's next for you?" That question had been swirling in my mind ever since the confrontation. What was next? For so many years, so much of my energy had been consumed by trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I was free from that burden, the possibilities felt endless and a little daunting. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I feel like it's up to me to decide. Not them. Not anyone else. Just me." "Sounds like the beginning of something great," Quinn said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. In the weeks that followed, I started making small changes that felt huge on their own. I redecorated my living room, getting rid of the hand-me-down furniture from my parents and replacing it with pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent my weekends exploring local coffee shops and parks, things I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for, and I started keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through what anyone else might think. Every small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the trip. The canceled reservation stared back at me, and I didn't feel a shred of regret. Instead, I felt a wave of determination. That money had been set aside for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I closed the spreadsheet, opened a new browser tab, and typed in solo travel ideas. A few weeks after my family's return, I booked a trip to Italy for myself. It wasn't the same itinerary I'd planned for them, and it wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. The moment I landed in Rome, I felt a surge of excitement and nerves. I'd never traveled alone before, but as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I had made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and enjoying leisurely meals at quaint little cafes. There was no schedule, no one else to consider, just me and the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, as I sat on the Spanish steps eating gelato, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams had always been wrapped up in making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted, learning a new language, starting a small business, traveling to at least 5 more countries. The list grew. Each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to live, not the life that was expected of me. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small, family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace. This trip was more than just a vacation, it was a turning point. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important. I didn't need it. I was enough, just as I was. When I returned home, my family tried to reach out again, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. "Hope you had a good trip," read a text from my mother. "Maybe we can all talk soon." I looked at the message for a moment, then put my phone down. I wasn't ready to respond, and that was okay. This time it would be on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase, placing my souvenirs on my shelves, I felt a sense of pride. A week after my trip, I got a call from my mother. This time, I answered. "Hello, Willow," she began, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "How was your trip?" "It was wonderful," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "We've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. "Handled it poorly? You cut me out of a trip I planned and paid for without even asking." "Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your father and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Sydney?" I asked. "Is she sorry too, or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation?" "She's upset," my mother admitted, "but I think she knows she could have handled things better too." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. This was about years of you putting her first and expecting me to just take it. I'm not doing that anymore." After a moment, she said, "I understand. We'll try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words touched a deep place inside me, but I had learned too much to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, "but it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." "You will," she promised. "We'll give you the space you need, but I hope one day you'll let us back into your life." After the call, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior and skepticism about whether they would truly change. But as I sat down with my journal that evening, I realized something important. Whether they changed or not wasn't my responsibility. In the months that followed, I kept my boundaries firm. I answered their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to smooth things over or mediate conflicts. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. I enrolled in a photography course I'd always dreamed of, but never had the time or energy for. I joined a local hiking group and even started planning my next solo adventure. Every step I took felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One day, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the person who tore herself apart for people who didn't appreciate her. I was someone who valued herself, who set boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. I felt truly free.